The year was 1883, and autumn hit Massachusetts like a blade to the bone. Cold, sharp, merciless. A carriage thundered down a forest road littered with dead leaves that cracked like brittle bones under its wheels. Above, a sky of heavy grey clouds loomed low, like it knew something terrible was coming. Inside the carriage sat Jonathan Moorfield. 35. Broke. Disgraced. His once immaculate coat hung loose on a man hollowed out by shame. Just weeks earlier, he'd been a respected lawyer in Boston. Now? The fallout of fraud accusations, screaming clients, and total financial collapse echoed endlessly in his head. He lost everything: reputation, fortune, friends. All gone. All at once. And now, there it was. Rising from a hill like something summoned, Moorfield Mansion. Built in 1790 by his great-great-grandfather. A Victorian fortress of stone and sorrow, its pointed towers stabbed the clouds, and its shattered windows stared like dead eyes. Silent. Watching. The carriage creaked to a halt. No farewell. No charge. The driver had been paid by a man named Thaddeus Green, the lawyer managing the property. Strange. But that wasn't the strangest part. Before leaving, the old man muttered a warning. The kind that chills deeper than the wind. No one from the Moorfield family has ever had a peaceful end. Then he was gone. Jonathan was alone. The iron gate wailed as he forced it open, the shriek echoing through the empty trees. The path to the house was cracked, tangled in weeds, like the earth itself was trying to reclaim it. The facade of the mansion revealed itself in dreadful detail, gargoyles crumbling with age, columns wrapped in grotesque carvings, shadows curling around the rooftop spires like claws. Under a pot of dead, frozen plants, he found it, a bronze key. Cold to the touch. Too cold. And heavy, like it had been waiting for him. He hadn't come here for shelter. He'd stepped into a legacy soaked in rot, whispered curses, and a mystery dying to be unlocked. And something inside that house already knew. He had arrived. The bronze key felt colder than ice. Heavy. Too heavy for its size. Jonathan stood frozen, the mansion looming over him like a predator. Every instinct screamed, "Don't go in." The air itself seemed to push him back, like the house was alive, and it did not want to be disturbed. He shoved the thought aside. "Nonsense," he growled. The key clicked. The door groaned open like the gates of a tomb. Inside, darkness swallowed everything. The entrance hall stretched out before him, rotting, forgotten. A thick stench hit him like a punch: mold, dust, and something else. Something wet. Living. Wrong. With one final breath, he stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The lock snapped shut. The silence was absolute. His fate was sealed. Pale light pushed through cracked windows, revealing sheet-covered furniture like corpses waiting to rise. Family portraits stared from the walls, eyes sunken, paint cracking, gazes too intense. The Moorfield bloodline. Watching him. A single oil lamp waited on a side table, waiting. He lit it. Room by room, the house revealed its decay. The dining room. The library. The kitchen. All sagging with time and secrets. On a dusty table, he found food left by the lawyer, stale bread, old preserves, and a bottle of whiskey labeled 1871. He turned to leave. A door creaked open beneath the stairs. His breath caught. The basement. A narrow staircase descended into blackness. He took one step forward. Crash. Something slammed upstairs. He spun, the flame flickering wildly, shadows warping across the walls like living things. "Is anyone there?" he shouted. Nothing. No reply. Just the deep groan of wood adjusting, or something else. He climbed the staircase slowly, every step complaining underfoot. The second-floor hall stretched long and tight, doors lining both sides like a corridor in a coffin. He picked one, the master bedroom. The door swung open. Inside, a massive canopy bed sat like a throne for the dead. Dust swirled in the light. On a desk, near the window, diaries. Dozens. Stacked high. He reached for one. 1795, Elijah Moorfield. His great-great-grandfather. The pages crumbled in his fingers as he scanned them. The nightmares continue. I see faces in the shadows. Voices in the wind. Elizabeth says I'm going mad. But I know what I saw in the basement. A chill tore through him. And then he saw it, an envelope. Unopened. Sealed in wax. His name written in impossibly elegant handwriting. He broke the seal. Inside, a letter. This was no ordinary inheritance. This house held secrets no lawyer dared put in writing. And Jonathan Moorfield was now part of something older than law, deeper than blood, and far, far more dangerous. This mansion has a history, the letter warned. Not a past, a curse. Jonathan's eyes raced over Thaddeus Green's words, heart-pounding. Read your ancestors' diaries before making any decisions. There are medical records in the office. I'll be in town next week, but until then, I suggest caution. Especially after dark. The candle flickered. Jonathan froze. A wind cut through the room like a blade. The curtains lifted, and for just a second, he saw it. A pale silhouette watching from the window. He ran to the glass. Gone. Only nightfall and the creeping blackness over the Moorfield estate. That first night, a storm brewed like a living thing. Jonathan lay wide awake on the dusty bed, surrounded by diaries full of madness. The wind howled through cracks in the windows. The walls moaned. Floorboards creaked like footsteps dragging, inching closer. Then, a whisper. His name. He bolted upright, nothing. But he heard it. Someone, or something, knew he was here. Morning came like a ghost. The pale light barely touched the house. He had slept fully clothed, barely rested, the diaries scattered like warnings around him. After choking down stale bread and cloudy preserves, Jonathan decided to do what the letter told him. Investigate. Everything. First stop, the office. First floor. Bookshelves from floor to ceiling. A heavy oak desk. Inside one drawer, a worn leather folder. Medical records. Ancient. Yellowed. The earliest? 1802. A psychiatric report. Subject, Elijah Moorfield. Diagnosis, severe paranoia. Hallucinations. Delusions of being watched. Symptoms intensified at night. Claimed entities lived in the walls. Said the basement was the source of the family curse. Then the report dropped a bombshell. Patient attacked his wife during an episode. Accused her of conspiring with the house. Afterward, he was confined to the attic. Alone. Monitored by nurses. Never allowed to leave. The final line of the report? He will not stop staring at the basement door. Jonathan opened the next folder, and nearly dropped it. Another psychiatric report. This time, his great-grandfather. Jeremiah Moorfield. 1835. Same pattern. Same age, 35. Same descent into madness. Paranoia. Hallucinations. Violent outbursts. But then, something impossible. Jeremiah's delusions perfectly matched Elijah's. But he never read his father's diaries. How? Jonathan's blood ran cold. He was 35 years old. Right. Now. He flipped faster through the documents. The pattern didn't stop. His grandfather Nathaniel. His father William. All at 35. All lost their minds. The final report shattered Jonathan's breath. William Moorfield hanged himself in the attic in 1865. After killing 2 servants during a psychotic break. Jonathan shoved the records aside, nauseated. This is why his mother ran. Why she took him to Boston. Why she never spoke about the mansion again. Then. Thud. A crash upstairs. Something heavy. Jonathan bolted from the office and sprinted up the stairs. Down the hall. A door ajar at the very end. Inside, a massive portrait had crashed to the ground. He turned it over. His father. William Moorfield. That same cold stare. Eyes that watched you. As Jonathan lifted the frame back onto the wall, he noticed something strange. A hidden door behind a wardrobe. He dragged the furniture aside. A concealed room. Small. Cramped. Dust thick in the air. Inside, a single desk, and a stack of his father's diaries. He sat down. The final volume was dated March 1865. The month William died. He opened it. And read. March 10, 1865. The voices are louder. I can't sleep. They call me to the basement. But I resist. I remember what happened to my father when he gave in. I know what he found down there. Jonathan's heart pounded. The basement again. Always the basement. Elizabeth says I should see a doctor. But this isn't a disease. It's the Moorfield curse. Passed by blood. I found the original land deed. Elijah bought this land from a native tribe. They warned him. Do not build here. The land itself was cursed. From the very beginning. The Moorfield legacy wasn't just a tragedy. It was a trap. And the final secret? Buried in the basement. This is where it gets insane. Buried in the final pages of his father's diary. Jonathan uncovered the origin of the Moorfield curse. A place where the veil between worlds is thin. Where ancient things, not meant for this world, sleep beneath the earth. Elijah Moorfield was warned. The native tribe pleaded with him. Do not build here. But Elijah built anyway. And when he dug the basement, he found it. The first stone. Jet black. Absorbing light. Breathing darkness. And now? That same stone was calling to Jonathan. His father's diary went off the rails. Visions. Shadows. Whispers. Each page more deranged than the last. Until finally, just one line. I can no longer resist. I must go down. Jonathan slammed the book shut. His hands were shaking. But he had to see it for himself. The sun was setting. The mansion's shadows stretched long and twisted. He relit the lamp. And opened the basement door. The staircase vanished into endless black. The air hit him like a wave, damp, cold. Metallic. Like blood. Each step echoed like a countdown. The walls wept moisture. And bore symbols, not letters, but warnings. The basement was massive. Chamber 1, dust. Decay. Crates of bones. Chamber 2, an ancient lab. Beakers. Surgical blades. Preserved things. But Chamber 3? That's where time stopped. A stone altar stood at the center. On it. The stone. Black. Irregular. Pulsing. Like it was breathing. Jonathan's lamp dimmed as he stepped closer. Light itself seemed to vanish into the stone. The floor? Carved symbols. And around the altar, stains. Dark, dried, unmistakably blood. Then, a cold gust. The lamp went out. Jonathan was in complete darkness. The silence was thick. Then, a whisper. So close it might have been inside his skull. Welcome back, Moorfield. We've been waiting for you. Jonathan ran. Blindly. Something was behind him. Reaching. Pulling. Hands he couldn't see, clawing at his legs. He stumbled up the staircase. Heart thundering. At the top. He slammed the door shut. Locked it. Turned the key. Sealed the basement. For now. But the question remained. What did Elijah unleash? And why, after generations? Had it finally decided Jonathan was the one it wanted? Jonathan barely escaped the basement. Breathless, heart racing, he slammed his back against the wall. Outside, pitch black. The mansion was silent again. But he wasn't alone. That night, he locked himself in his room. Chair under the doorknob. Eyes wide, ears sharp. The footsteps returned. Closer. More human. But no one was there. And when sleep finally claimed him, the dreams began. His ancestors, standing in a circle. All around the altar. Their faces twisted in some unholy mix of ecstasy and terror. As they offered their blood to the black stone. He woke in a cold sweat, body aching, mind spinning. Morning came, but hope didn't. The mansion was wrapped in a suffocating fog, like it was choking on its own secrets. Jonathan had one goal now. Get answers. He ate a quick meal. Dressed in his best, worn elbows, frayed cuffs. And set off for Blackwood, the closest town to the cursed property. The walk? Haunting. The fog barely lifted. The forest leaned in. And Jonathan kept looking back. Something was following him. Blackwood looked like any quiet New England town. White church. Narrow streets. Crooked houses. But when he entered the grocery store, everything stopped. Silence. Conversations died. Every eye locked on him. Good morning, Jonathan said, trying to stay calm. I'm Jonathan Moorfield. I recently inherited the mansion. Moorfield? The man behind the counter cut him off, big guy, silver hair, heavy stare. It's been a long time since a Moorfield showed their face here. Since the incident with your father. An old woman muttered. Then crossed herself. Hard. Jonathan swallowed. His pulse spiked. What did they know that he didn't? I found diaries, he said. Documents. But there's so much I still don't understand. Why do you all fear my family's name? A thick, unspoken tension swallowed the room. Finally, the man behind the counter broke the silence. I'm Harold Simmons, he said slowly. I knew your father. And your grandfather before him. He studied Jonathan's face like it was a map of old wounds. You look like them. Jonathan leaned in. Mr. Simmons. I need the truth. What really happened at Moorfield Mansion? Harold looked around the room. Some customers shook their heads. Others just turned away. The silence was a warning. But Harold? He was about to break it. And what he was going to say could change everything. Next. The town's darkest secret. A hidden ritual. And a pact that never ended. This curse didn't start with Jonathan, but it might end with him. Stay tuned. It's about to go way deeper. Come with me. That's all Harold said before heading toward the back of the store. Jonathan followed, past the aisles, past the stairs, into a cramped office that smelled of old wood and secrecy. Harold shut the door. Locked it. And then, it began. The Moorfields have been in Blackwood since 1790, Harold started. He sat down, heavy with the weight of generations. Elijah Moorfield came from Boston. Big dreams. Deep pockets. He bought the land from the Wampanoag tribe, cheap. What warnings? Jonathan asked. He remembered what he'd read in his father's diary, whispers of a curse. Harold looked him dead in the eye. They called it the land of hungry spirits. They said it was a portal. A door to the other world. Beneath the mansion, ancient things slept. Things older than time. Elijah didn't listen, Harold said with a sigh. He was a modern man. Science. Logic. But soon, he changed. It always starts the same. Isolation. Strange behavior. Experiments in the basement. He found something down there. Something that wasn't meant to be found. Jonathan's skin went cold. The black stone. Harold's eyes widened. You know about it. I read the diaries. But I still don't understand. What is it? Why does it do what it does? Harold leaned back. No one knows. Some say it's a meteorite. Others, a cursed artifact. But what we do know. Every Moorfield who stayed long enough went mad. And worse. He opened a drawer and pulled out a newspaper clipping, yellowed and cracked. Jonathan read the headline. Moorfield tragedy, 2 killed, 1 suicide in mansion horror. The article was brutal. His father. 2 employees. An axe. Symbols on the wall, painted in blood. A journal full of mad ravings, claiming he had spoken to beings beyond the veil. My mother never told me any of this, Jonathan whispered. She said he died, from illness. Harold's voice softened. She was protecting you. After the funeral, she left and never came back. For a while, folks thought the curse had died with your father. Harold paused. But now you're back. Silence. And then Harold asked the question Jonathan had been dreading. Have you felt anything? Voices? Visions? Things that shouldn't be there. Jonathan hesitated. His lips parted. Because the answer was yes. But saying it out loud? That would make it real. Jonathan hesitated. But then he told Harold everything. The footsteps. The dream. The black stone pulsing in the dark. And the voice that whispered in the basement. Welcome back, Moorfield. We've been waiting for you. Harold's face went pale. Then it started, he said grimly. That's exactly how it began, for all of them. It's just dreams, Jonathan argued weakly. Just noises. But Harold cut him off. No. It's a pattern. First the sounds. Then the whispers. Next comes the pull. The mansion wants you in the basement. He leaned in, voice low and urgent. If it's already begun, you need to leave that house. Immediately. But Jonathan shook his head. I can't abandon it. It's the only thing I have left, my inheritance. Harold looked him dead in the eyes. Your inheritance isn't just the house. It's the fate of the Moorfields. Knock knock. The door creaked open, interrupting the moment. A woman stepped in, early 30s, sharp eyes behind wireframe glasses, brown hair tied in a severe bun. Father, Dr. Blackwood's here for his order. She paused when she saw Jonathan. Harold cleared his throat. Elenina, this is Jonathan Moorfield. Her eyes widened. Moorfield? As in, the mansion. Jonathan stood, extending his hand. The same. Jonathan Moorfield. A pleasure to meet you, Miss Simmons. Harold smiled faintly. My daughter works at the town library. Knows more about Blackwood history than most of us. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. Then maybe you can help me understand what I've walked into. Elenina adjusted her glasses. Actually, I've been researching your family for my thesis. Behavioral patterns in isolated bloodlines. And let me tell you, the Moorfield case. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. Finally. Someone willing to talk. Jonathan felt a rare flicker of hope. I'd love to hear what you've found. She nodded. I'll be at the library this afternoon. 2 o'clock. Cut to Jonathan stocking up around town. Food. Candles. Kerosene. And a revolver. Because something in his gut told him. This isn't just old madness. It's something worse. 2 p.m. Sharp. Blackwood's Municipal Library. Red brick walls. Tall windows. Dust and secrets. Elenina greeted him at the door. She led him to a private study room in the back. Old documents, books, and photographs covered the table. I started this research 3 years ago, she explained, opening a leather-bound volume. It began as a study on hereditary mental illness in isolated New England families. She met his eyes. But the Moorfields? They aren't just a case study. They're a phenomenon. Elenina opened a thick notebook. Pages and pages of meticulous notes. Dates. Names. Patterns. What's strange, she said, isn't just the madness. It's how consistent it is. She flipped to a hand-drawn timeline, and slid it across the table. Each Moorfield man. Each one unraveling at exactly age 35. Each one hearing whispers. Seeing shadows. Ending in violence. In typical hereditary illnesses, she explained. You see variation. Different ages. Different symptoms. But the Moorfields? She looked up. It's like watching the same disease play out on a loop. Generation after generation. Jonathan stared at the timeline. Elijah. Jeremiah. Nathaniel. William. And now, Jonathan. 35 years old. But here's the weird part, she continued. It only affects those who stay in the mansion. Long enough. She flipped to another page. Your great-uncle Thomas left for California in 1840. Lived to 87. No symptoms. No whispers. No violence. Jonathan swallowed hard. So, you think it's the mansion itself? Elenina paused. Nodded. It's a hypothesis I can't ignore. She opened a second folder. At first, I suspected environmental factors. Contaminated water. Mold. Mercury. But tests done in 1870, after your father's death, found nothing. Jonathan leaned in. There's more, isn't there? She hesitated. Then opened a third folder. Unofficial reports. Testimonies. Things science can't explain. Martha Jenkins, housekeeper, 1850 to 1863. Heard voices in the basement. But no one was down there. Dr. Thomas Blackwood, family physician. Saw shadows moving against the direction of light. But then, the photo. She handed it to Jonathan. A sepia photograph. 1860. The Moorfield mansion. Look at the attic window. Jonathan held the photo closer. And froze. A pale figure stared directly at the camera. Faint. Blurred. But familiar. That looks like me. Elenina spoke softly. It's not your grandfather. He was in Boston that day. Hotel records confirm it. The mansion was empty. The room fell into silence. Jonathan's hands trembled as he returned the photo. What do you think is happening, Miss Simmons? Elenina took a slow breath. As an academic? I stick to the facts. She looked him in the eyes. But as a historian of Blackwood. She closed the folder. I believe there is something in the Moorfield mansion that is not human. Something ancient. And it's still there. It transcends everything we understand. Elenina said, voice low. Something that feeds on the minds of the Moorfield men. Not illness. Not madness. Something else. Jonathan whispered, almost to himself. The stone. In the basement. Elenina's eyes widened behind her glasses. You saw it? Last night. A black object. It felt alive. She scribbled notes furiously. I've read about it in the diaries, vague descriptions. But no one's ever survived long enough to talk about it in detail. Jonathan leaned forward, urgent now. Is there anyone in the records, anyone who broke the cycle? She flipped through her notebook, pages fluttering like nervous wings. There is one case. Your great-granduncle. James Moorfield. Jeremiah's younger brother. In 1837, he started showing signs, hearing things, the usual pattern. But instead of isolating like the others, he sought help. Medical? Asked Jonathan. Elenina shook her head. Spiritual. He went to a Wampanoag woman, a healer. Sarah Pequot. She continued, voice soft with reverence. She was a descendant of the people Elijah Moorfield took the land from. A keeper of ancestral knowledge. She was said to understand the veil. Jonathan gripped the edge of the table. What happened to James? Elenina flipped to another page. He left the mansion for 3 months. When he returned, the symptoms were gone. He lived to be 67. No further episodes. Whatever Sarah did, it worked. Jonathan stared at her. Did he write it down? Elenina sighed. No. And Sarah died in 1845. Jonathan looked away, the weight of disappointment pressing on him. But then? Are there descendants? Elenina nodded cautiously. Rumors. There's a woman, lives on the Wampanoag reservation, about 20 miles from here. Ruth Pequot. Said to be Sarah's great-granddaughter. Hope flared in Jonathan's chest. I need to find her. Elenina placed a hand gently on his arm. Her voice was quiet but urgent. Before you do. Are you already seeing things? Jonathan hesitated. He could lie. Say it was just nerves. Just imagination. But he didn't. Yes. Voices. Shadows that move when they shouldn't. Elenina went pale. Then it's already begun. What do you mean? She flipped to her timeline again. The symptoms usually take weeks. You've been in the mansion how long? 2 days. She bit her lip. Unless it's growing stronger. Or, more impatient. She began gathering her documents. Mr. Moorfield, you can't go back there tonight. Jonathan stood. I have to. All my belongings are there. I don't have money for lodging. She met his eyes. Then take this, she said, slipping a small silver pendant into his hand. It belonged to Sarah Pequot. Passed through the Simmons family. It's said to protect against what waits in the dark. Jonathan closed his fingers around the pendant. I'll be careful. Then allow me to accompany you, offered Elenina. As a researcher, I have a professional interest in the phenomenon. And as a human being, I'm concerned for your safety. Jonathan blinked at her, surprised. Miss Simmons, I can't allow you to put yourself in danger for my sake. She smiled, calm and resolute. I won't be in danger. According to all accounts, only Moorfield men are directly affected. Besides, I know more about your family than anyone not named Moorfield. I can help you understand what the diaries are really saying. He hesitated. But something in her confidence, or perhaps in the way the shadows had followed him out of the basement, made him nod. Very well. But we don't stay past midnight. As they left the library, the sun was already dipping below the horizon. Shadows stretched long and lean across the narrow streets of Blackwood. They stopped briefly at Elenina's house. She returned with a small suitcase and a determined glint in her eyes. The road to the mansion wound through thickening forest. Twilight bled into dusk, and the trees seemed to lean inwards, skeletal limbs clawing toward the fading light. No words were spoken. The silence was brittle. Then, the mansion appeared, a silhouette of brooding spires against the dying sky. Elenina gasped softly. What is it? Jonathan asked. I thought I saw lights. On the 3rd floor. She squinted. But it must have been the reflection of the sun. Jonathan didn't reply. He had seen the lights too. And they weren't reflections. Inside, he lit the lamps one by one, pushing back the heavy dark like lifting a wet cloth from a corpse. Elenina moved through the space with careful curiosity, jotting notes in her small leather-bound book. Impressive architecture, she murmured, running her fingers over the stair rail. Late colonial bones, but Gothic detailing. That's unusual. My great-great-grandfather hired a European architect, Jonathan said. He'd worked on castles in Transylvania, if I'm remembering right. Elenina raised a brow. Well, that explains the gargoyles. He led her to the first-floor library. The room welcomed them like a crypt, still and cold despite its carved wooden shelves and dusty velvet chairs. He lit the fireplace, and the flickering flames threw dancing shadows across the cracked walls. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a dusty bottle he'd found in the kitchen and handed one to her. To preparation, he offered. To survival, she replied, clinking her glass gently. They sat close to the fire. Outside, the wind picked up, a low howl across the trees like something ancient whispering beneath the branches. I propose we review the remaining diaries tonight, said Elenina, settling in and opening her notebook. The more we understand the pattern, the better our chances. Jonathan nodded and reached for the stack of aged leather-bound journals. His ancestors were waiting for him on those pages. And so, he opened them. They cracked open the first diary at exactly 9:02 p.m. The air was already heavy, as if the mansion itself knew what they were about to uncover. For hours, Jonathan and Elenina flipped through decaying pages, each one a scream from the past. And what they found? A horrifying pattern. Every Moorfield man went mad. First came the voices. Then came the shadows. Then came the obsession with the basement. And always, the black stone. Always, the blood. Jeremiah Moorfield had written of a blood ritual, one meant to connect him with the ancients. And decades later, Jonathan's own father had written the same thing in shaky, desperate handwriting. The blood feeds the bond. Elenina scribbled feverishly in her notebook. They weren't just haunted, they were being used. But then... crash! Upstairs. Heavy footsteps, pacing across the ceiling like something searching, hunting. Is someone else in the house? Elenina whispered. Jonathan didn't answer. He just grabbed the revolver. They climbed the stairs, each creak of wood a countdown. The sound of dragging furniture echoed from the master bedroom. That door had been open. Now it was locked. There's no key, Jonathan said quietly. Not from inside. And then, it spoke. A voice, deep, hoarse, alien, echoed from behind the door. It was the exact voice Jonathan had heard whispering in the basement. Then came the smell. Iron. Decay. A thick black liquid began to pour from under the door, slow and pulsing like a living thing. The smell of blood filled the corridor. We need to go, Jonathan said, pulling Elenina's arm. But it was too late. The door exploded open. Nothing but blackness inside, until it stepped out. A creature. 8 feet tall. Skeletal. Wrong. Its arms dragged along the floor. Its joints bent backward. But worst of all, its face. It was Jonathan. Or some decayed, nightmare version of him. Eyes like pits. A mouth stretched open far too wide. Jonathan raised the revolver. But Elenina screamed, "No. That's what it wants, violence. Blood." And for a moment, time stopped. The creature stared at Jonathan. And vanished. Just like that. No sound. No trace. Only silence. And the feeling that something ancient had just blinked. They stood frozen in the hallway, heartbeats louder than the ticking clock. They had seen it. Faced it. But the stone. The stone was still in the basement. And this wasn't over. The creature's smile was inhuman, too wide, too wrong. Jonathan instantly knew what they were dealing with wasn't just evil. It was ancient. "Run," he shouted, slamming into Elenina as they bolted for the stairs. Behind them, that thing moved fast, a blur of claws, bone, and blackness. They reached the front door. Jonathan grabbed the handle. Locked. Not jammed. Not bolted. locked by something beyond logic. This way! Elelenina screamed, dragging him toward the library. Inside, she slammed a bookshelf against the door as claws scraped at the wood. Jonathan ran to the windows. Sealed. The glass and wood had melted into one solid, immovable piece. And then, the voice. From behind the door. Clear. Chilling. Jonathan Moorfield, your blood belongs to the ancients. Jonathan backed away, trembling. The lineage must continue. The pact must be honored. What pact? Jonathan shouted. What do you want from me? Silence. Then a sound like 100 mouths speaking as one. A host. A portal. A sacrifice. Elelenina's eyes widened. That's it, she said. This isn't a hereditary illness. It's a possession. Everything, the diaries, the deaths, it's all part of this thing. Jonathan shook his head. This is insane. But the stone, she whispered. It's not just symbolic. It's the source. It's connected to something not from here, and it wants your blood. Crack. The door split. The bookshelf was moving, pushed by something no human could ever match. We have to go to the basement, Elelenina said, suddenly deadly calm. The basement? Jonathan gasped. That's where it started. That's suicide. It's also where it ends. The door burst. No time. There's a trapdoor in the kitchen pantry. Jonathan shouted, pulling her. They tore through the dining room, hearing wood splinter behind them. Books flew. The beast was inside. In the pantry, Jonathan shoved barrels aside. There it was. The old trapdoor. Dusty. Sealed for decades. Quickly. Elelenina yelled. The creature's shadow twisted on the wall, closer. Closer. Jonathan yanked the trap open. Elelenina slid down the ladder. Jonathan followed, slamming the door shut just as a claw sliced the air behind him. Blackness. Jonathan struck a match, flick. A tunnel. Stone walls. No air. And at the end of it, the basement. The stone. The truth. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was the final round of a game that had been playing itself for 2 centuries. And the next move was theirs. The tunnel stretched ahead like the throat of some ancient beast. This must be a service tunnel, Elelenina whispered. It probably leads to the main basement. They moved forward, matchlight flickering. Every step deeper, every breath harder. The air was thick with rotten earth, like the lungs of a buried corpse. Then, finally, it opened up. Jonathan gasped. They'd made it. The lab. The exact one he'd found the night before. Beyond it? The altar chamber. The black stone. Jonathan froze. Should we keep going? Elelenina turned, face pale, but her eyes locked in. We have no choice. That thing is coming. And it won't stop. The altar chamber swallowed them in silence. The black stone sat in its place, but now? It was pulsing. A dull, dark glow. Not light, a devourer of light. Elelenina stepped closer. This is unlike anything I've ever seen. Crash! The trapdoor ripped off. It had followed them. We're out of time. Elelenina shouted. Did the diaries say anything about stopping this? Jonathan's mind was chaos. Until. Yes. James. My great-granduncle. He wrote something about a purification ritual. Said a woman named Sarah Pequot taught him how to break the bond. What kind of ritual? Something about blood, freely given, not taken. And an incantation in some strange language. Elelenina's face fell. That's not enough. Scratch. The sound of claws. Closer. Faster. Wait, Elelenina breathed, looking at the stone. Maybe we don't need the exact words. What? The stone responds to Moorfield blood. That's the pattern. And if intention matters. Jonathan's eyes widened. You think, if I offer my blood, but to break the bond? Exactly. The opposite of what your ancestors did. A total reversal. Jonathan stepped toward the altar. The stone throbbed. His head ached with whispers. It wanted him. But not on its terms. He took out his pocket knife. Deep breath. A slice. Blood spilled. I, Jonathan Moorfield, he said, voice steady, offer my blood not to strengthen, but to break the pact made by Elijah Moorfield. I release my lineage from this curse. He pressed his bleeding palm to the stone. Immediate agony. Pain shot through him like fire in his veins. The stone screamed. A low hum turned into a high-pitched shriek that shook the walls. The creature roared from the tunnel. But it stumbled. Writhing. Shrieking. Something was happening. Something real. The bond was breaking. Or the entire house would go down with it. Then. It screamed. An inhuman, soul-ripping wail that shook the entire chamber. The creature emerged from the tunnel. Its body warped. Its face? A hideous, twisted version of Jonathan himself, but mangled in fury, a mockery of flesh. It lunged forward. Then froze. Just a few feet from the altar. As if something unseen held it back. A force field of blood and will. Under Jonathan's palm, the black stone began to crack. Hairline fractures spider-webbed across the surface. The screams grew louder. The creature convulsed, body melting. Turning into smoke, no, shadows. And those shadows were being sucked into the stone like ink into a drain. It's working. Ilelanina screamed over the noise. But Jonathan? He was fading. The pain in his hand was like molten glass. It wasn't just draining his blood. It was draining him. His vision blurred. His knees buckled. Jonathan! Don't give up. Ilelanina's voice sounded like it came from underwater. With a final surge of everything he had. Jonathan pressed harder against the stone. And then. Crack! The stone shattered. A blast of black light, an explosion of darkness, erupted from the altar. An impossible paradox. It flung both of them against the walls. Then. Silence. Jonathan opened his eyes. Everything ached. Ilelanina crawled toward him, her face cut and dusty. But smiling. You did it. He sat up, dazed. Where the black stone once sat. Now, just shards. Cold. Dead. Harmless. They looked like coal. Not ancient. Not cursed. Just rock. Is it over? He whispered. I think so, she replied, breathless. When the stone broke, the creature vanished. Jonathan looked at his hand. Still bleeding. But something worse. A black stain was creeping from the wound, like ink under the skin. This doesn't look good, he muttered. Ilelanina ripped her petticoat and bandaged the wound quickly. At dawn, we're finding a doctor. No arguments. They climbed the stairs back to the mansion's entrance. Everything felt different. Still broken. Still old. But lighter. As if something evil had finally let go. Do you think the curse is really gone? Jonathan asked as she helped him into an armchair. She hesitated. I don't know. But what you did tonight, no Moorfield ever has. You faced it. And you won. Jonathan looked at the bandage. The black stain was still there. Still growing. At what cost? He whispered. Ilelanina followed his gaze. Her face tightened with concern. Tomorrow, she said, we find Ruth Pequot. If anyone can undo this, it's her. The fire crackled beside them. They stayed there, in the quiet. Waiting for the sun. For the first time since Jonathan had entered that house, there were no voices. No shadows moving in the dark. Just silence. But somewhere, beneath the bandage, the curse still whispered. Even as the fire crackled beside him, Jonathan could still feel eyes watching him. Not from the shadows. From inside him. The black stain on his hand kept spreading, creeping like poison ink up his arm. And with it came cold. Not regular cold. Bone-deep, soul-chilling cold that made him shiver from within. By dawn, things were bad. The mark had reached past his elbow. He could barely walk. Every step felt like dragging a corpse. His own. But there was one last hope. The One Oak Reservation. And Ruth Pequot. The woman who had helped break this curse once before. They traveled miles through dense forests, rocky paths, and endless silence. Jonathan leaned on Eleanina, barely staying conscious. Until they saw it. A small wooden cabin tucked beneath ancient pines. And standing on the porch, she was already there. Waiting. As if she had known. Grandson of William Moorfield, she said without hesitation. Her voice was calm, but heavy with meaning. The spirits told me you were coming. Ruth Pequot looked like time itself had sculpted her face. Wrinkled copper skin. Piercing dark eyes. Silver hair braided with shells and beads. She wore a blend of ancient tradition and modern survival. Jonathan didn't even react. He was too far gone. The black stain was now pulsing under the bandage. Ruth's eyes locked on it instantly. The mark of the ancients, she whispered. Come inside. We don't have much time. Inside her cabin, it felt like stepping into another world. Herbs hung from the rafters. Animal skulls, dream catchers, ceremonial beads decorated the walls. A small fire burned in the center, casting long, flickering shadows. Ruth helped Jonathan onto a fur-covered bench. She unwrapped the bandage. And what she saw made her go still. The black mark had become something alive. It pulsed. It moved. Like it was breathing beneath his skin. You destroyed the stone, she said quietly. Very few have ever done that. Jonathan's voice was a whisper. What's happening to me? She didn't flinch. When you broke the stone, you shattered their primary link to this world. But when you offered your blood, you made a new connection. They are trying to use you now. As a new doorway. Eleanina stepped forward, desperate. Can you save him? Ruth paused. Then nodded slowly. My great-grandmother Sarah once stopped the same corruption. She saved James Moorfield. She moved fast. Grabbing powders, herbs, bones, and vials from every corner of the room. Her hands moved like clockwork, never hesitating. As she worked, she spoke. And what she said changed everything. The ancients aren't just spirits. They are not demons. They are beings from before time itself. When the world was young, they walked freely among us. She turned to face Jonathan. And now they want to walk again. Through you. And that's when Jonathan finally understood. The curse wasn't over. It had just begun. They walked this world before men had names, Ruth whispered, grinding herbs with ancient precision. And when humans emerged, the ancients were banished, cast out by the first shamans. But they never stopped trying to come back. Eleanor leaned forward, still clinging to her curiosity despite the looming dread. The stone, that was their link, wasn't it? Ruth nodded. One of many. But yes. Elijah Moorfield found it while digging the mansion's foundations. He was curious, reckless. Performed a ritual with his own blood. And unknowingly, he made a pact. A curse. That would bind every generation after him. As Ruth added drops from ancient vials into her stone mortar, the mixture hissed and gave off a thick, earthy aroma. There are 3 parts to the ritual, she said calmly. 1. Purification of the blood. 2. Severing of the bond. 3. Protection from their future return. Then she paused. Her eyes locked onto Jonathan. But there is a price. Jonathan blinked, barely following through the haze of pain. The ancients are bound to your bloodline. To break the link forever, the bloodline must end. He stared, not understanding at first. You mean I have to die? Ruth's voice was gentle. No. But you can never have children. The ritual will make your blood incapable of creating life. Silence. Thick. Crushing. Centuries of Moorfield history would end with him. Eleanor looked at Jonathan, her expression shattered. Isn't there any other way? But Ruth's answer was already written in her eyes. No. Jonathan looked down at his arm. The black stain writhed beneath the skin, like something trying to crawl out. He saw his ancestors. Madness. Murder. Secrets. He saw the future. Children he'd never know. Names he'd never speak. Faces that would never exist. And he said, I accept. His voice, for the first time in hours, was clear. Ruth simply nodded. Not surprised. You have the courage of your great-granduncle James, she said quietly. He made the same choice. Then she began preparing the final circle. She lit candles of animal fat, placed beads in precise patterns, and drew symbols in colored chalk around the hearth. One more thing, she said. I need something that carries your essence. Jonathan reached into his coat. His pocket watch. Passed down through generations. Ticking with the ghosts of every Moorfield man. Ruth cracked the glass, dropped a fragment into the bubbling mixture. Then added a single drop of blood from a dark, dust-covered vial. Ancient blood. Older than memory. Finally, she turned to Jonathan. Now. Your blood. Freely given. With full knowledge of the sacrifice. He rolled up his sleeve. The black veins were pulsing now. Alive. Like roots, reaching toward something. Ruth made a single cut. Precise. Clean. Jonathan's blood dripped into the bowl. Thick. Red. Streaked with black corruption. The moment it touched the paste, the mixture hissed. And began to bubble. Releasing a dense, bluish smoke that filled the cabin with a sharp, acrid scent. Ruth looked him in the eyes. Now. Drink. Ruth offered the bowl to Jonathan. Drink, she commanded. The liquid inside was thick and dark, steaming faintly. It smelled of ashes, copper, and something else. Something ancient, alien, not of this world. Jonathan took the bowl with trembling hands. He drank. The taste was foul, bitter, sharp. Like swallowing flame and rot. It burned its way down his throat. And then it spread. Like molten metal flowing through his veins. Ruth didn't wait. She picked up a small deerskin drum and began to beat it. Slow, rhythmic, hypnotic. With each pulse, the air in the cabin thickened. Now comes the most difficult part, she warned. They will not give up easily. She began to chant. A language older than language. Syllables that didn't just echo. They bent space around them. Sounded like memory made sound. The fire in the hearth roared. Flames turned red, then blue, then green. Then black. Black fire. Somehow glowing. The cabin shook with the resonance. The very wood creaked with ancient pressure. And then Jonathan screamed. The black mark on his arm moved, crawled, beneath the skin. Alive. Desperate. He felt it burrow deeper. Spreading agony through muscle, bone, marrow. It wanted out. And then the voices returned. Not whispers anymore. You are ours, Jonathan Moorfield. Your blood is our path. Your body is our door. You cannot deny what was promised. They weren't speaking into his ears. They were inside him, sinking claws into his thoughts. He felt himself slipping, like drowning, like something was pushing his soul aside and taking his place. Jonathan clenched his fists, gritted his teeth. He saw Eleanor's face, worried, pale, shouting something. Fight, Jonathan. Don't let them win. But she sounded so far away. Inside his mind, the ancients showed him their realm, a place beyond comprehension, where geometry was broken, and time moved sideways, where creatures of impossible angles slithered in voids that pulsed like organs. This will be your world. You will bring us through. Your body will open the gate. Your mind will be the sacrifice. Jonathan screamed again. Not in fear. Not in surrender. In defiance. And something broke. Not bone. Not skin. Something deeper. An invisible thread. An ancient tether. Was cut. The pain was worse than anything he had ever known. But with it came clarity. And power. And choice. He felt the black stain retreat. Shrinking, recoiling. Concentrating back into his palm. To the very point where he had first bled. The voices faltered. Their fury became static. Distant thunder. They were losing. Ruth's chanting grew louder now. Not alone. A chorus joined her. Dozens of voices. Hundreds. Thousands. Spirits. Ancestors. They filled the cabin, though no one else was there. The walls trembled as if the very past had come to stand beside them. And then the black fire exploded. A column of darkness shot toward the ceiling. Not heat. Not flame. Something more. It bathed the room in impossible light. And still, nothing burned. Jonathan fell backward, his mind torn between here and not here. And then the voices were gone. Someone from within the Moorfield line chose sacrifice over legacy. You, Jonathan, have done what none before you dared. You didn't try to escape it or control it, you ended it. Jonathan sat quietly for a moment, absorbing the weight of her words. He looked at the dark scar on his hand again. It no longer pulsed. It felt still. Like a door locked from both sides. Eleanor broke the silence. So, your family has been protecting the rest of us, quietly, for generations. Ruth nodded solemnly. Guarding. Containing. Enduring. She set her empty bowl aside and leaned back in her creaking chair. But that chapter is over. The price has been paid in full. They left the cabin at dawn. The forest felt different. Calmer. As though even the trees had exhaled. Jonathan walked without help now, though slowly. His arm was weak, but no longer burning. The black mark remained, but it was quiet. Dormant. They reached the mansion by mid-morning. It stood as it always had. Crumbling. Stately. Cursed. Jonathan and Eleanor moved through its halls with new eyes. No whispers. No flickering shadows. No cold that reached into the soul. In the study, Jonathan gathered the diaries. The writings of Elijah, James, William, even his own. Each one a piece of the puzzle, each one a danger if misused. Eleanor lit the fireplace. Jonathan hesitated only for a moment, then tossed the first diary in. The flames caught quickly, hungry. Page after page turned to ash. When the last book was gone, Jonathan stood in silence, watching the fire die down. It's done, he said quietly. As they stood outside, bags packed, keys in hand. Jonathan turned one last time to look at the mansion. It no longer loomed. It simply was. I'll sell the land. Let the forest take back what it can. Eleanor gave him a small smile. And where will you go? He looked at the horizon. At the vast sky. At the rising sun. Someplace quiet. Clean. Free of shadows. A place where my story can begin, not just end. She nodded, stepping into the car beside him. As they drove away, the mansion faded behind them. Not banished, not erased. But left behind. And for the first time in generations. The Moorfield legacy was no longer a curse. Will you do now? Eleanor asked softly, her voice carrying a blend of weariness and wonder. Jonathan stared into the dying embers for a long moment before replying. Live, he said finally. For the first time in generations, just live. Eleanor nodded, closing her notebook gently. No more experiments, no more investigations. Just a quiet acceptance of the extraordinary things they had witnessed and endured. Outside, the night was still. The mansion stood behind them, its silhouette no longer menacing, but merely sad. An empty monument to a family's long war with the unknowable. Jonathan looked up at the stars. They no longer whispered. They only shone. Epilogue. Years passed. The Moorfield estate was sold, the land left untouched. Nature crept in and reclaimed its place, ivy, moss, root-splitting stone. Eventually, the house collapsed, and the earth consumed it whole. Jonathan lived simply. Far from cities and archives. The scar on his hand remained, but it never changed. And the voices never returned. Eleanor published nothing. Not about the mansion. Not about the stone. But she visited often. Sometimes with her children. Jonathan never spoke of what might have been. They remained friends. And whenever she left, she always took a bit of silence with her. As for Ruth, her cabin stood in the same forest, quietly, eternally. And in it, the memory of the Moorfield curse became part of a deeper story. Not written. Not told. But remembered. Some legacies are carried not through blood, but through wisdom. And some battles are won not by strength, but by choosing to end them. What will you do now? Eleanor asked softly. Sell the mansion. Return to Boston. Perhaps, start a new life. Jonathan looked at her, seeing her in a new light after all they had endured together. And you, he asked. Complete my thesis. Continue my research, though perhaps with a slightly different perspective than before. She smiled. The world is stranger than academia often allows for. In the weeks that followed, Jonathan arranged for the sale of the Moorfield property to a lumber company. They planned to clear the land, uninterested in the mansion itself. He felt no regret as he signed away the estate, a cursed legacy that had haunted his family for generations. Before leaving Blackwood, he visited the town cemetery. There, he stood in silence before the graves of his ancestors, Elijah, Jeremiah, Nathaniel, William, men who had been consumed by forces they could neither understand nor resist. With him, their bloodline would end. But in that ending, perhaps, they could finally know peace. Eleanor accompanied him to the train station on the day of his departure. Their farewell was bittersweet, laden with the weight of shared secrets few others would ever believe, let alone understand. Will you write? She asked as the train approached. Of course, Jonathan promised. Though, some things are better discussed in person. Perhaps I'll visit Boston someday, she said, smiling. I'd like that. As the train pulled away from Blackwood, Jonathan watched the fading silhouette of his ancestral home recede into the distance. The mark on his hand tingled, a permanent reminder of the price he had paid for freedom. Not just his own, but that of all the Moorfields who might have come after him. It was a heavy burden, the knowledge that he would be the last of his line. But it was a burden he bore with pride. The madness that had flowed through his family's veins for generations had been purged. The cycle was broken. And in that breaking, there was peace. A peace no Moorfield had ever known. Jonathan touched the star-shaped scar on his hand and smiled. Some endings are also beginnings.